Alright, so we got these 177 spoilers, and this fight is continuing to be pretty exciting, as it has been, so let's get into it. It's a three-way fight. Yuta versus Ryu versus Uro. So yeah, triple threat match, and this is super interesting for JJK, I'll say, because we don't typically see matches like this, so it's a nice variation from Gege here. And if you follow One Punch Man, we also recently saw that in the manga a couple chapters back, and it was great then, so I'm assuming it's going to be maybe even better now, because that was more so of a one-dimensional fight, and this is more so like three very different characters with different skill sets all kind of meshing together. But let me just go into the previous chapter and talk about how we got to this point. So after Okkotsu had taken out the cursed spirit Kurourushi, he pretty much immediately went into his next fight against Uro Takako, the woman with the inverted eyes, which are similar to Ogi Zenin and a few other characters actually. I'm not sure if this really means anything, or at least I don't think it's ever been explained. Speaking of One Punch Man, her character design is very reminiscent of Psychos after she had fused with Orochi. I wonder if that's where Gege got the inspiration for this character's design. And this was bound to happen because Ryu and Takako were like observing Okkotsu fighting the other big four, I guess we'll say, of this Sendai colony. And then once Okkotsu came in and did the job for them, they decided, hey, might as well make our moves now. But anyway, like I said, it was Takako being the first one to attack Okkotsu, and we got to see her curse technique in real time. And the way that she described it was her curse technique treats the sky as a surface. And then Okkotsu elaborated on that, saying that so sky becomes a surface. Both her attacks blew past my guard and sent me flying. If that involves surfaces, there must be some trick. Now, there is some trick indeed, especially since the developments that we're going to read in these spoilers, but when she used this like actually against Okkotsu, we saw his arm kind of become elastic, but once he was like out of her range, it suddenly went back to normal, and he said it didn't even hurt. So I talked about this in my review for 176. Even then, there's only so much that I was able to go into because of the limited amount of information that we have, and of course the way that Gege ambiguously portrays these techniques and panels sometimes. But before the fight got a little too heated, we saw Okkotsu use a little talk no jutsu on Takako. While that was happening, Ryu Ishigori was like, hey, might as well attack now, and he straight up shoots like a Basto Lord level Sero out of his hair, which he calls the Granite Blast. And while it's not outright said in a narration or dialogue, we can assume that this is his curse technique. And this eventually led to Okkotsu saying, well, I guess I'm just gonna have to take them both out now, but I guess he's choosing to go after Ryu first, because we see him navigate around Ryu's cursed energy blast and uses the hole in the bridge that Rika made when she was fighting off Kurourushi's cockroach swarm, and he winds up behind Ryu, closing the distance, and makes it more of a physical fight, seemingly taking the advantage away from Ryu. But I'm assuming it's not going to be that easy, and that's where the chapter ends, and it brings us to what is going to be a triple threat match here. It starts to show Ishigori's past, and that he was a sorcerer back then. The fight continues between Ishigori and Yuta, and then Takako joins in the fight. So we kind of assume this too, and I was talking about this in my 176 review as well, that a lot of these powerhouse sorcerers that we're going to see in the Culling game, especially the ones that seem to be more knowledgeable and more confident than the others, are probably sorcerers from like Sukuna's time. And not only that, but they also kind of have the same thing going on as Sukuna. They were made into cursed objects back in the day, and Kenjaku arranged so that they would have vessels strong enough to contain their cursed objects so that they could be reincarnated to the present day in the Culling game. So we know that Kenjaku like made Yuji by like pretty much literally giving birth to him. Now I don't know if Kenjaku did that for all of them, but that would be pretty funny if he did. But this past stuff, like around 1,000 years ago or whatever, is super interesting to me, and I really hope we get more flashbacks or just way more insight into that stuff, because it's heavily implied that that was like the peak of jujitsu. Like the jujitsu and the power scale that we see now is at a much lower level than what it was back in the day. And we also get a little more insight into what could have been happening back in the day, as well as the parties involved in that stuff, because Takako name drops the Fujiwara family, thinking that Okkotsu is a part of that lineage. So it really remains to be seen what's going on with that at this point, but I'm assuming before the series is over, we're for sure going to get way more insight into what was going on back in the day, especially once all of Sukuna's backstory is revealed. Yuta faces Ryu's blast barehanded, and he even punches him deep into the ground. Alright, so yeah, Okkotsu is a savage beast. We knew that, and I guess he's even taking it close quarters with Ryu's hair blast here. Ishigori thinks that Takako shouldn't be interfering in this fight, and he attacks her, but she reflects the attacks right back to him. Okay, so this goes more into, I guess, the nuanced aspects of Takako's curse technique. Maybe we're gonna get more insight into in this chapter, or maybe Gege is waiting to reveal that, because I'm assuming that she's gonna stick around for a while, maybe. Obviously, it's not telling us that this is like taking him out, and I'm sure Ryu is strong enough to be able to take what he gives. Like, I'm sure he can take one of his blasts as well, maybe. But maybe it could also be a red herring, and we assume that he's been defeated, but he's actually not. But I'm guessing after this happens, the rooftop explodes and Rika gets exposed. But then in Ducky spoilers, it says Yuta summons Rika. So maybe it's a little bit of both here. So the rooftop getting exposed, I don't know if they're necessarily still at the same location that they were at the end of chapter 176, because Okkotsu says that Rika was still protecting the people in the stadium. People that were kind of forced to stay there because of Druve, and then later because of Kurarushi's cockroaches. And like I've also been saying, that's kind of a way to raise the stakes for Okkotsu, keeping Rika out of the battle, but it's looking like the gloves are going to come off here, because I'm guessing Rika is coming into the battle here. And that brings us to next week's chapter preview, where it says, in the Sendai colony, a big brawl. Is Yuta finally going to use Rika? Now, maybe. But if he does wind up using Rika, there has to be some kind of smoke and mirrors to this, I'm assuming, because she's just too powerful, especially like with Okkotsu. And I don't think Gege has written himself into a hole with this dynamic here. I'm pretty sure he's going to handle it accordingly. And this could come into play with Takako's curse technique. Maybe what she does with her space manipulation can foil whatever Rika is doing at the same time, because Rika kind of operates in a similar way. If you ever see like when she's summoned, now I'm not saying they go hand in hand, at least just aesthetically they appear similar. And also another thing is that we haven't really seen Okkotsu use the copy curse technique ability yet. And I don't think Gege has removed that from him, because that's kind of like one of his most broken aspects, and it was heavily on display in Volume 0, and that movie just came out. So I'm guessing it kind of has to come into play eventually. Maybe he's going to copy Takako's space manipulation ability. But yeah, just so many variables going into this. I'm really curious to see where this is headed. Let me know what you think about these spoilers in the comments, and if you liked the video, please give it a like, please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day. I'll see you in the next one.